Hey, welcome back to another episode. I'm Jaimie Engle of the Write Engle, your host, the only podcast recorded by an author who's walking her dog. That's right, you're listening to Write a Book That Doesn't Suck. Thanks for being here today. Well, I gotta tell you, we're in the midst of crazy right now. The coronavirus is everywhere. Schools are shutting down. I just heard Amazon's shutting down. I think it might be good to talk about fear, fear in your writing. Fear can be a great motivator. What makes fear so amazing, as it is in real life, is that fear is not necessarily based in fact. You know, if you've ever traded stocks before, I day traded for a little while, and actually because of all this, I think I might be getting back into it because it's so much fun and challenging. But if you've ever day traded, people don't buy on news. They don't buy on facts. They don't sell on the quality of the company and the, expectations of what's to come. The masses buy and sell on greed and fear. And they are two of the most powerful forces in our world. They dictate decisions made by our governments. They dictate decisions made by you in your everyday life. So I'm going to expand this podcast to greed and fear, because those are two elements that you should be using to push your characters to greatness. And if you're not, what an awesome way to add something that doesn't change the storyline by just implementing some fear or some greed in the eyes of your main character, your protagonist, or your bad guy. And even, to some extent, your secondary characters. What comes to mind is in Harry Potter, off the top of my head, I cannot remember which one it is. It is the one, Goblet of Fire. There it is. I knew it would come to me. In Goblet of Fire, Ron is pissed that Harry's name is in the goblet, and he believes beyond a shadow of a doubt that Harry did it himself. Why? Because he is jealous. And what is jealousy a root of? Greed. Greed says, I want it, it's mine. Well, jealousy is just a twig on the tree of greed, folks. And Ron, he becomes Harry's enemy briefly, which we'll talk about in another podcast. And he's not his sidekick anymore. He's actually another antagonist that Harry has to deal with. And all because of greed. There was no truth in it. I mean, if Harry had logically sat down and said, okay, wait a second, my buddy's not that smart. He can't perform that level of magic, first of all. Second of all, if I researched to see how crazy these games are, I would know that Harry would never do that on purpose, right? That would be logical. People don't think and move and react in logic. They react in fear and greed. So there's your greed tip. Fear. Man, there are entire movies based off of fear. I mean, The Walking Dead right there is the fear of what if. What would happen if? And we're kind of feeling that today with the whole coronavirus. Not zombie apocalypse, so that would be pretty badass. But more like the fear of the unknown, the fear of businesses shutting down, the fear of how am I going to pay my bills, the fear of am I going to get sick? Is someone I know going to get sick and die? These are thoughts we're all having right now. If we weren't having these thoughts, we wouldn't care. It wouldn't be affecting us. But it is affecting us. So how can you build fear into your character? Your hero is supposed to save the day, right? But your hero is supposed to be human. So when you're building your character, no matter how amazing and incredible they are, they have to be vulnerable, and you have to show that vulnerability to your reader, not in a way that throws it down their throat, but in a way that just exposes the inner being of your hero. Because if your hero is perfect, we are not going to relate to that hero because we are not perfect, and we don't know anybody else who's perfect. So that's kind of a bad thing. And honestly, the same for your antagonist, for your bad guy. If they are perfectly evil, it's not realistic. Now, it works for some stories. You've got some kids' stories where the bad guy is just bad to be bad, or it's a reoccurring theme and in the story that, the bad guy comes and does whatever, and that's expected that he's just bad. That's it, period. He is just bad. He's just evil. He's just mean. I guess the Eye of Sauron is the only thing I can think of that's just pure evil. But deep down inside, I believe that the eye has a reason to be mean. You know, I mean, maybe the guy just needs a little Visine in that eye. He's just got red, itchy eye. And you know how that feels? He just needs a big bottle of Visine. But anyway, I digress. So when you're building fear into your character, what you need to do is set them up into these situations where it's not in the middle of facing their challenge that they face their fear. If you think about it, that's kind of a crappy way out. It's a lazy way out for you. Because when we're in the middle of a situation, when we're literally facing that dragon that we've been afraid to face, it doesn't matter at that point if we're afraid or not. We're there. We have no choice. We have to fight them, because if we don't, they're going to kill our family and they're going to burn down our village, right? So in that moment, as a reader, as someone who's connecting with the hero, I'm not very impressed that he's able to raise his sword and attack. Because if he didn't, what would he become? A coward. And that's by his own doing. So what you need to have is to show that character facing their fear when everything is perfect, or when things are less than near the edge of the end. Hey, recording my podcast. So when you watch something like Guardians of the Galaxy and you have Rocket and he's sitting there talking about at the very end, and he's talking about how he stole the batteries and how they had the funeral, and he says those few words that really touch, I mean, I cry every time, but they really touch the viewer when he's trying to say, like, that's me, you know, I did those things. I was mean on purpose because I didn't want to be hurt. I did everything he did. And you connect with him, and he becomes more human. And I know he's a animated raccoon, but he becomes more human. And there's a scene earlier in the last Guardians of the Galaxy where I am blanking on the guy's name, and I can't believe it. I've watched that movie probably more than the editors have watched that movie. Zandu, there it is. When Zandu and him are fighting, when Zandu and Rocket are fighting, and Zandu finally says, I know you because you're me. And it's such a powerful, I'm going to cry just talking about it. It's such a powerful moment because they're calling out their fear when there's nothing to be afraid of. And they're finding their faults in each other, which brings them closer because they see each other when they look at each other. It's like a mirror reflection of one another. And honestly, that is brilliant writing. And that's how something, when I first heard about the Guardians of the Galaxy, I thought, what a stupid idea. And it's one of my favorite of all the Marvel properties because it's so just deep and beautiful. And they talk about and face their fears in moments of peace. So that's what I encourage you to do. I encourage you to look at your stories. Where do you have moments of peace where you can have your character facing their inner demons, their turmoil, their fear, their greed? Maybe they're on the mission because of greed. Maybe they are following what they think is their purpose for greed, to be recognized. And you know you got to knock them off that platform, right? You got to get them back to reality. So when you're looking at your stories, when you're going through edits, even if you're able to when you're writing, think about where you can amp up the fear and the greed in your characters' personal experiences when they are not facing their highlighted fear point, when it's just a day. And let me know how it goes in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. Guys, if you enjoy this podcast, I would love for you to follow it, like it, share it. Put what you want to know about in the comments. Let me know what it is that you want to learn about so you can write a book that doesn't suck. I would love to talk about that in an upcoming podcast. Check out all the podcasts here at Space Coast Podcast Network. They are pretty phenomenal. And if you want to join our Facebook group, you can click the link in the narrative below. It's just in groups at the Write a Book That Doesn't Suck, one word. And you can also jump on Amazon if you found value in any of these topics and get a whole lot more in the book of the same name. Guys, you are rock stars. Thanks for spending 10 minutes with me. And until next time, happy writing.